going to be January 6th. It's in the news now, and I think it's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. So, question for Destiny first. Did Donald Trump incite an insurrection on January 6th, 2021?
Absolutely. This is probably ignoring every other issue we've talked about, of which I think there are plenty that I would say disqualify Trump from holding office. I think that the conduct and the behavior leading up to and including January 6th, I think is wildly indefensible. I am excited to see Ben try to, the 3 to 4 stages are the taking what I think any reasonable person would say, knowingly false information about elections being rigged or ballot boxes being stuffed or Ruby Freeman, running ballots 3 times in Georgia, taking that knowingly false information and trying to call state secretaries and stuff to have them flip their electoral vote. That was horrible. The plot that Eastman hatched in order to have these like false slates of electors where all 7 states had citizens go in and falsely say that they were the duly elected electors that could submit votes to Congress. That was insane. That happened. Asking or begging Pence to accept these false states of electors initially, and then just say you should just throw it out completely and throw it to the House delegation, which was majority Republican. That was absolutely unbelievable. And then on the day of January 6th, trying to capitalize on the violence by him, Giuliani, and Eastman making phone calls to senators and congressmen saying, well, don't you think maybe you guys should delay the vote a little bit? Don't you think they're just really mad about the election? I think he said to McCarthy, they're more upset than you. And his utter dereliction of duty in not doing anything to stop the rioting that happened on January 6th because he was too busy taking advantage of it. I think all of these things are horrible. I look forward to seeing the Jack Smith indictments play out in court, maybe even the Georgia RICO case. But I think all of these things are unfathomable. And I think when you look at the plot from start to finish, clearly the goal the entire time was to circumvent the peaceful transfer of power. That was the goal from start to finish, whether it was through false claims, whether it was through illegal schemes, or whether it was through violence at the Capitol to delay the certification of the vote.
Ben?
So I'm glad you're excited. It's always fun. So there are 2 elements to incitement of insurrection. One is incitement. The other is insurrection. So incitement has a legal standard. So does insurrection. Neither of those standards are met. So if you're asking me, morally speaking, did Donald Trump do the right thing between November 4th and January 6th? I said, I will continue to say, no, he did not. I think he was saying things that are false. With just factually false about his theories with regard to the election, about the election being stolen, about fraud. This was all adjudicated in court. He did not even bring many of the claims that he has brought publicly and all the rest of that. If we're talking about incitement of insurrection as a legal standard, it doesn't meet any of those standards. When it comes to incitement, it has to be incitement to immediate lawless action. That's the standard for incitement. And I'm very meticulous in how I use this because I happen to speak publicly a lot, and that means there are lots of people who listen to me, which means some of those people are probably crazy. And some of them may go and do a crazy thing. Did I incite them? The media tend to use the word incitement very loosely with regard to this sort of stuff in the same way that Bernie Sanders, quote unquote, incited the congressional baseball shooting. He did not. Bernie Sanders has a lot of things I disagree with. I think Bernie's a schmuck. Doesn't matter. He did not incite that. So saying bad things is not the same thing as inciting violence. Inciting violence, the legal standard in the United States is, I want you to go punch that guy in the face. That's inciting. With regard to insurrection, typically in insurrection, and there are some descriptions in case law, though none in statutory law, as far as I'm aware, the typical description in case law is the replacement of one legitimate government of the United States with another by violent means. The notion that Donald Trump coordinated any such insurrection is belied by the FBI itself. The FBI put out a report in, I believe it was August of 2021, suggesting that there was no well-coordinated insurrectionist attempt coordinated by the White House. In fact, what you had was Donald Trump thrashing around like that weird alien in the movie Life. I don't know if you ever saw it with Jake Gyllenhaal, where he's like kind of thrashing up against this glass box, just an alien just thrashing up against the glass box. That I think is more what you were seeing from November 4th to January 6th. And then again, the claim that January 6th itself was an insurrection. So virtually, I'm not aware that anyone was charged with actual insurrection. There were some people who were charged with seditious conspiracy. There are insurrection statutes that do exist. No one was charged under those particular statutes. There were some people who you could say informally had insurrectionist ideas. Those would be the people who wanted to hang Nancy Pelosi or kill Mike Pence. And those people are in jail right now. And the election went forward. The election was certified. Mike Pence presided over the certification. Mitch McConnell presided over the certification. Joe Biden has been the president for the last 3 years. So Donald Trump, by the way, was still president at that point. If he had actively wanted to do what other people who have actually launched coups have done, he would have theoretically called the National Guard not to put down the riot, but to actually depose the sitting government of the United States in the name of a specious legal theory. He did not do that. He did not attempt that. Nobody working for him did that. The most you can say, I think, about what everybody was doing is that, and I want to say everybody. We can talk about Trump because this is really about Trump. He used a phrase that Trump was disseminating knowingly false information. The word that's carrying a lot of weight there is the word knowingly. So knowingly implies a knower. Do I think the information he was disseminating was false? Yes. Do I think that Donald Trump has a unique capacity to convince himself of nearly anything that is to his own benefit? Absolutely. And I think that that's actually what Donald Trump was doing there. And the evidence of that is Donald Trump being a human and all of us watching him for the last several years. So, the idea that he knew it to be false, I'm not even sure those standards apply in any, and just assessing him as a human, which is really what we're being asked to do because there's an intent element to this crime. Do you think that today Donald Trump knows that he lost the election?
Absolutely.
So I don't actually. I think
so I'm glad that you have the attorney background. When we are assessing mens rea, when we're looking at certain criminal statutes where intent is required, it's a reasonable person standard, right? Would a reasonable person have known that they were...
no, it depends on the mens rea standard. So it's not the same in every case. If you have to establish individual intent, then it's not enough to say a reasonable person should have known. That would be enough for a negligence statute. Usually when you're talking about reasonable person statutes, just legally speaking, a reasonable person statute is, should a reasonable person have known? That's when you get to manslaughter. Sure. You can't do a reasonable person standard on first degree murder. So you have to establish actual motive in first degree murder.
But for first degree murder, you don't need the statement of I plan to kill this person or I intend to kill this person. We can prove that state of mind.
You need
circumstantial evidence.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Sure. You could prove it.
So I feel like my feeling for Donald Trump was there were all these people around him that he trusted to investigate election fraud. He trusted Barr and the DOJ. He asked Pence, his vice president, to look into it. He asked his chief of staff. He asked his legal counsel. He has so many people that ostensibly he trusts them if he's asking them to look into it. And when all of them looked into it and reported back to him, no, we found nothing. Unless we're going to literally make the concession that Trump might actually be a delusional psycho man, at that point, should he not have realized, okay, maybe there's
nothing? I think he should have realized the day of the election that he lost the election, but that's not. But that's
sure. But I'm just asking. I'm saying that, at that point, should he not have known that for him to go and propagate those claims that he'd asked all of the people he trusted to research, and then for him to take those claims to Michigan and to Georgia, and then publicly and to try to convince people to throw out the election, you don't think that?
But you're doing the same thing. You're reverting to should a reasonable person have known? Yes, a reasonable person should have known. Did Donald Trump know? That's a different question. And so conflating those two questions is going to get you into some messy territory. By the way, this is why Jack Smith charged the way Jack Smith charged.
Yeah, which wasn't
Jack Smith did not charge conspiracy. Jack Smith did not charge insurrection. He did not charge seditious conspiracy, right? The reason is because Jack Smith is a good lawyer. What he's doing is he's actually broadly, I would say pretty obviously, expanding statutory coverage in weird areas in order to cover a thing that doesn't quite fit into any of these legal categories. But the point that I'm making is that Jack Smith is on my side of this. He doesn't think that he can actually establish the intent necessary to convict under a seditious conspiracy or an insurrection.
I agree with that, but I think a lot of the underlying facts, though, because he does bring up those calls to Raffensperger in Georgia, he does bring up in the indictments that they were knowingly false information. So it seems like that's going to be part of the case, maybe not to convict on any of the 4 particular charges that he mentioned, but it seems like that's probably going to be part of what he's going to have to establish in court to convict Trump.
So I want to look at the actual text of the charges. So I'm sorry that I don't have them memorized. I believe one's a fraud charge that generally does not apply to cases like this. Generally, the fraud charge is you're trying to steal money from the government.
Sure, fraud has been used pretty broadly in the past, though. It doesn't have to just be, because Smith has done oral arguments in response to a lot of the claims by Trump's lawyers. This was one of them. The infinite civil and criminal immunity was another one of them, where he cites past cases where these types of things, because I think it was to defraud of civil rights, I think was the 4th charge.
Right, so the defraud of civil rights is usually somebody standing in the actual voting house door and preventing you from voting, not you have a specious legal theory that you espouse in court about whether those votes should be thrown out.
Sure. Although I don't like when we say specious legal theory and novel application, which I do agree some of these in some ways is novel. I don't think we've ever also had a president try to do this before. It is a novel situation where somebody has resisted the peaceful transfer of power this clearly in so many different ways.
Well, if you're talking about the legal cases, that's not true. But Gore sued in 2000. Right? I mean, if we're talking about the legal cases,
comparable to Gore, if this was comparable to Gore, then
I'm not saying it's comparable to Gore. I'm saying that if the idea is that espousing a legal theory in court amounts to de facto some form of election. denial or interference in some way, that's not, as a general principle, it's over-inclusive.
Sure. Gore wasn't trying to decertify the vote, though, for states, right? They challenged their thing to the Supreme Court. They lost their case in the Supreme Court, and then power transfer happened.
Right.
after.
And Donald Trump had a bunch of legal challenges, and then he had a rally, and then there was a riot, and then he left power.
Yeah, but the Eastman theory of what Pence could do in Congress is a far cry away.
A truly
from-
shitty theory. I mean, make no mistake. It's a
but not
really
just
bad theory.
shitty. I think that if any Democrat had done this, I feel like we'd be looking at it in a far different lens. As in, we would be using terms like attempted coup, subversion of peaceful transfer of power. If a Democrat vice president had tried to essentially say that in Congress they could throw away the vote.
So I think what I want to get to here, actually, so we can be more specific,
Sure.
is why are these terms important? We agree on, largely speaking, what happened.
Mhm.
I think the characterization of the term, we keep kind of bouncing around between two different categories, and I want to make sure
we can dump the legal stuff.
Okay,
actually,
okay,
because
so we're just
not
talking-
looking
fine,
at incite because,
fine,
as you said, Jack Smith, nobody's charging with incitement,
Right.
and I don't believe insurrection is a part of it. So we're dumping legal. Just in terms of like a president that is trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. So whether you call that a bloodless coup or whatever contemporaneous term you want to use.
Right. So prevent the peaceful transfer of power
Yes.
with all means, or using means that are inappropriate, not quite the same thing.
Using
Meaning
means that
means
are
that-
inappropriate or illegal.
Okay. Inappropriate. Okay, so illegal, I don't think so. I don't think that these charges actually meet the criteria for the various charges, and we can discuss each case if you want.
Sure.
As far as inappropriate,
Mhm.
sure, I think tons of inappropriate stuff. I mean, inappropriate seems
The reason why I don't
not-
like the word inappropriate, though, is because then conservatives are very quick to say, well, sure, he was inappropriate, but everybody was inappropriate.
I mean, I'll concede that he's more inappropriate than others. I just
Okay.
don't see
The
that
most
as-
inappropriate.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean,
that's
like-
important to me, though. Does it not bother you that, like, Donald Trump sought through legal and extra legal and Trump magical ways of trying to entrench his power as president past when he should have been able to? Is that not something that is incredibly troublesome?
I mean, the question to me is the bigger question that I think the Democrats are trying to promote in this election cycle, which is this means he is a threat to democracy sufficient that if he were to win the election, there would not be another.
Is
He
that
is
not?
such
But,
a-
he
and my
tried
answer
to
to
do that
that
last
is-
time. Could he not try to next time?
And I mean, he could try to do whatever he wants, presumably, and he would fail the same way that he did last time
Why do we think that?
because he failed.
Because if you
Because there
fail
was a
once,
riot,
it
and
never
within
succeed.
3 hours, yes.
Like, let's say hypothetically, Lord, save me. Let's say hypothetically, Giuliani was the next head of the Department of Justice. Giuliani was the next Attorney General.
How would he be confirmed?
I'm not entirely sure if because so much of the Republican Party, despite feeling like they don't support Trump when it comes time to actually back him in Congress.
Also, I would have to check
um,
whether he would be barred by criminal conviction from holding. I don't know the answer to that.
Sure.